Good afternoon, everyone. This is meeting number 64 of the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security, Wednesday, December 5th, 2012. I will remind each of you today we are televised, so if you wouldn't mind turning your cell phones to the silent mode or to off. I'll start that by making sure that the chair's phone doesn't go off after making the request to shut yours off. We are televised. We are considering the supplementary estimates. B, 2012-13, votes 1B, 5B, 10B, 45B, 50B, 55B, under Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness. As our witness, we have Canada's Minister of Public Safety and National Security, the Honourable Vic Taves. He is accompanied by his officials. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, François Gumont, Deputy Minister, welcome. From the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Commissioner Bob Paulson, welcome back. From the Canada Border Services Agency, Luc Portelance, President, and also from the Correction Service of Canada, Commissioner Don Head, welcome. And from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Richard Fadden, Director. We also have the National Parole Board represented by its chairperson, Harvey Cherneko, so welcome here. Our committee thanks the Minister and his officials for making themselves available to answer questions from members of Parliament related to the supplementary estimates. And Canadians know that the Minister and his officials have appeared numerous times before our committee and is always helpful in our deliberations. And so I would encourage all members to keep their questions specific to the supplementary estimates. Certainly we want to keep them in context to what we're here to study today. Mr. Minister, I know your time is limited because of the votes. We've been held back a little bit, and I understand you have to leave at 4:30. So we would love to hear your address and then open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And yes, my staff will be here and the officials will be here for another hour after 4:30. I'm pleased that the committee has shown such a strong interest in examining the expenditure of taxpayer dollars. It's a pleasure to speak and answer questions that you may have with respect to Supplementary Estimates B currently before this committee. Since you've introduced all the officials here, I won't have to do that. Let me be clear on the onset. I can assure you that our government will not engage in risky new spending schemes or in endless spending that will increase deficits, and we will not increase the tax burden on Canadians. Our government is committed to ensuring the most efficient use of Canadian taxpayers' dollars, and I can assure this committee that this will continue to be at the core of our agenda. In these supplementary estimates, public safety portfolio organizations are requesting parliamentary approval for a net request of $447.9 million. The most significant requests include $180 million to be allocated for the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements, or DFAA, and $242 million to be allocated for contract policing. And following up on the Prime Minister's commitment, another $50.2 million in flood mitigation investments to help communities devastated by the 2011 spring and summer floods. As we indicated at the time, both the DFAA and the contract policing figures were not available for the preparation of the main estimates. It was therefore not possible to include these funding requests in the 2012-2013 main estimates. I think it's worth mentioning that these three items make up 99% of the funding that we are requesting. It's important to note that in 2012-13, the public safety portfolio will reduce its total appropriations by $179.4 million to reflect savings measures announced in Economic Action Plan 2012. Savings for this fiscal year will be achieved through measures to restructure or streamline some administrative and research functions. Building safer communities for all Canadians remains a top priority for our government. Our intention is to strengthen our already impressive track record on that front in the most fiscally responsible way possible. If approved by Parliament, funds requested through SUPS B will be prudently invested, among other things, in disaster recovery and mitigation initiatives in communities across Canada, as well as in Canada's contract policing model and in our ongoing efforts to strengthen security at our border while ensuring that we facilitate the movement of legitimate goods and services. Today, natural disasters across Canada have resulted in a significant increase in provincial and territorial requests for assistance through the DFAA. A recent example is the severe flooding that occurred last year in my home province of Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, and in Quebec, which resulted in significant response and recovery expenditures. SUPS B seeks approval for $180 million in additional funds for disaster financial assistance arrangements and $50.2 million for the financial support to provinces and territories for 2011 flood mitigation investments. For many years, the federal government has played a very important role in helping communities recover from natural disasters through programs such as DFAA. The effective mitigation of these risks is also our top priority. This thinking forms the foundation of our National Disaster Mitigation Strategy, which was launched in 2008 as a collaborative effort across all levels of government to develop sustainable, disaster-resilient communities across Canada. This is why our government committed up to $99.2 million over 3 years in Economic Action Plan 2012 to assist the provinces and territories with the cost of permanent flood mitigation measures undertaken in 2011. Our government also remains committed to discussing with the provinces and territories the development of longer-term national disaster mitigation program, recognizing that mitigation can lessen the impact of natural disasters on vulnerable communities, reduce the costs associated with these events, and enhance community resiliency. Committee members will know that at the time of the main estimates for this fiscal year, we indicated that public safety would be returning to Parliament through supplementary estimates to seek funding to reflect the full federal costs of contract policing under the new policing services agreements. The new policing services agreements came into force on April 1, 2012 for a period of up to 20 years, expiring in 2032. However, at the time main estimates were being prepared, the government was still negotiating with the majority of the partners, and consequently it was not possible to include this in the main estimates. SUPS B seeks funding of $242 million for the federal costs of contract policing services for all contract jurisdictions and to provide incremental funding to meet requests for new policing resources requested by provinces, territories, and municipalities for 2012-2013. The new agreements which our governments have reached represent the culmination of a lengthy and important negotiation process, nearly 4 years of hard work and commitment on the part of our respective officials. I want to thank our officials very much for the hard work that they did in that respect. They address the key issues raised by provincial, territorial, and municipal governments during negotiations, including governance, accountability, program sustainability, and cost containment. They offer increased input into issues affecting the quality and standards of contract policing. They also provide for a sustainable police service by ensuring a fairer sharing of all legitimate and actual costs of delivering police services in each jurisdiction. Supplementary Estimates B seeks $33.1 million for initiatives which support commitments under the Action Plan for Perimeter Security and Economic Competitiveness, and this includes $21.9 million to the Canada Border Services Agency, $9.8 million to the RCMP, and $1.4 million to Public Safety Canada. We're making great progress on implementing our commitments under the Action Plan. More work continues every day. Last month, we launched an accompanying pilot in Prince Rupert in British Columbia to inspect marine cargo in transit by rail under the principle of screened once, accepted twice. This helps save time and money for both businesses and government. We've also enhanced benefits for Nexus members, a joint Canada-U.S. Trusted Traveler initiative to facilitate movement across our shared borders of pre-approved travelers. Last June, we amended the 3-year residency requirements to extend Nexus eligibility to non-resident Canadian and U.S. citizens. This allows our citizens who reside abroad and who meet program requirements to benefit from Nexus. We've created new Nexus lanes across the country in both BC and Ontario. All of these initiatives and many more will go a long way towards helping to ensure we continue to deliver on our commitments under the Action Plan. Funding requested under SUPS B addresses ongoing priorities as well as new and renewed initiatives. As well, we're seeking funds of $20.4 million to further maintain the quality and integrity of frontline services offered by Canada Border agencies or agents. The safety of Canadians depends on our ability to run effective programs, services, and initiatives. To that end, I respectfully ask the members of this committee to support these supplementary estimates. Thank you, and I would, in my few minutes remaining, be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll move very quickly into the question-ring round. First round, 7 minutes to Ms. Bergen, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. Thank you to each one of your officials for being here as well. And I want you to know how much we appreciate the good work that each one of you do in helping keep our country safe. Minister, I want to ask you about something very specific, and that's CBSA, our Canada Border Security Agency. There has been a lot of misinformation from the opposition and from others in regards to what some of our changes have meant. I think that the misinformation sometimes, the motivation might not always be honorable, because we have made some cuts to fat in CBSA and to some areas where taxpayers' dollars was going that didn't necessarily produce what taxpayers would ask for, which is to keep our borders safe and secure. I'm wondering if you could comment specifically on the investments that we have made in regards to frontline border officers, as well as what some of our changes have meant in terms of, for example, there's been the misinformation that's out there that we've cut drug-sniffing dogs at the border, and we know that that's not true. Can you clarify our investments at the border and what some of our changes to waste and mismanagement has meant?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to clarify some of this. I know I'll have to be very quick about it, but I want to emphasize, first of all, that contrary to some of the assertions that have made by some, that frontline border officers have not decreased. In fact, since we came into government, there has been an increase of 26% in border officers. So these are frontline officers. Also, I note that some indicate that the drug-sniffing dogs have been eliminated at the land borders. This has not, in fact, happened. There has been some restructuring in respect of where these dogs are deployed, but we do retain them at the land border because we feel that that's probably the most effective place for those dogs to be. In terms of some of the other details, perhaps the head of CBSA, the President, can add certain other details in respect to the budgetary issues.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, you're correct. In fact, the cuts that CBSA have been aligned with transforming a lot of the back office work that we're doing, realigning programs. The front line, which really is the people that you meet at primary, either at land, border, or air, has not been affected. I think the way to measure success is the volumes over the past few years have been rising steadily at about 6% a year. That's over the last 2 or 3 years. And notwithstanding that, our wait times have gone down. Our enforcement actions have remained steady, and our inspection rates have been maintained. I think that's a pretty good indicator of the commitment that we can continue to make in both in terms of facilitating travel, but also enforcing the laws of Canada.
When there is the attempt of contraband to be smuggled across the border, the majority of the time, can you tell us, is it intercepted directly at the border because of a frontline officer by chance checking out a vehicle or an individual, or is it because of intelligence and work that's done even prior to that specific group or load coming? It's a combination of it's a layered approach. Firstly, we do a lot of pre-screening, whether it's in air or in the marine mode. Sometimes it's officer intuition. Other times it's through various detection technologies. We do take a number of containers aside every day to inspect them based on risk management and targeting. And a lot of the seizures that we get come from that particular process. Other times it's tips that we get from our law enforcement partners generating our own intelligence. So it's a variety of factors. Occasionally it is officer intuition, but certainly we don't rely entirely on that. Thank you. How much time do I have, Chair? 2 minutes. Minister, I'm wondering if I could go back to something else you talked about, and that's the emergency measures, that the disaster financial assistance agreement that we have with the provinces. You mentioned your home province, Manitoba, which is also my home province, and of course some of the most major flooding occurred in 2011 in my riding of Portage-Lisgar, right around Portage-La Prairie. And I know that when the Prime Minister visited the riding, obviously you were there, the Minister of Defence was there. There was a very firm commitment made by the Prime Minister in terms of mitigation efforts that provinces were making. Can you talk about what we've committed to provinces under the mitigation portion of fighting flooding, and then also the program that we have under DFAA, Disaster Financial Assistance?
I think we have to make very clear that those are two separate things, and you have done so. DFAA essentially compensates provinces for damages, for eligible damages under the agreement. and that is negotiated between the provinces and the federal government. At last dollar, the Government of Canada is paying about 90 cents on the dollar, and that formula ratchets up very quickly to that 90% issue. I think in Manitoba, it's it kicks in after about $1 million, the disaster financial assistance, a little more than $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. It kicks in, and then the percentage basis increases very quickly. What I was very proud of the Prime Minister announcing, however, was the mitigation, which we as governments have not really gone into to a great extent. There has been some mitigation back in 1997 after the big flood in 97, where there was an agreement between the federal government and the then provincial government, which I happen to be a part of, in terms of mitigation. That mitigation has frankly saved the Government of Canada millions and millions of dollars. In some of the serious flooding, no residential homes or businesses have been destroyed as a result of the mitigation. And so we committed for 2011 about $100 million in respect of flooding that can go towards mitigation. But just as important, we're undertaking discussions right now with the deputies at the deputy level to see how we can create this national mitigation program so that we're not simply compensating year after year, rebuilding the same bridges, the same culverts year after year, but actually putting mitigation measures in place so that we can fix it once and for all and save the taxpayers in the long run a lot of money.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We'll move quickly to the opposition. Mr. Rousseau, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Taves, for being here, Minister. What I think is worrisome in this supplementary estimates B is the lack of supplementary funding for the Border Services Agency. Given the revelations over the last few months and last few weeks, it is clear that officers are lacking in resources, financial resources, human resources, material resources. It is clear that there needs to be reinforcements. We've noted a number of cases or situations where both we and the media have noticed that it really is putting people in danger. Why put more resources to detain people that are victims of human smuggling, as was the case of the most recent group of Romanians who arrived in Ontario? But there were cutbacks of $143 million. Had that not happened, they might have prevented this type of a situation. It might have allowed us to have the resources for our officers. We're just not seeing that in this Sup B.
Well, in fact, if you had been listening to what I said, there is an additional $21.9 million being requested for CBSA. And I find it strange to be answering the question I've consistently answered, that yes, we are putting more resources into frontline services, putting 26% more officers than when we came into office. But it's not simply putting more officers on the street so that we can catch and release people who are breaking the law, who are actually breaking the law as part of a criminal organization. You actually have to put legislative matters into place. And you and your government or your party have consistently
2015
did you say carbon tax?
Good one, Mr. Taves.
Carbon tax, yeah. But you and your party have consistently opposed the measures that we bring in to facilitate the CBSA officers from actually carrying out their jobs, and that concerns me. I mean, if you were actually concerned about the
Sorry,
crossing
Mr. Taves,
of
but
these
that's not
individuals.
what the people are telling us on the border, on the point of entry.
Well,
they're lacking
well, here
they're
you
lacking
have
material, they're lacking the money to put some more people on guards, they're lacking camera, infos, and IT. They're lacking a lot of things, and we're not seeing
well,
that
we can talk about all of those initiatives under the Beyond the Borders initiative, and I hope that your party will in fact support the Beyond the Borders initiative, because that's in fact what we are going to start talking about alternate methods of ensuring that we can facilitate trade and travel across the border and ensure that we do in fact stop criminals from utilizing the border, as exactly in your area where they have been utilizing the border areas, and where wait, let me finish, where you in fact have been opposing measures that will make CBSA officers more effective in stopping criminals. So instead of opposing those measures, work with us so that you could help your constituents instead of frustrating your constituents.
This is not true. Last question to my colleague, John.
Mr. Rafferty.
I have a couple minutes.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Minister, there is, and I don't know how you can break down the supplementary estimates into dollar figures in this for my question, or whether they even apply in this particular case. There is a policing group in Canada that is woefully inadequately taken care of, and I'm talking about First Nations policing right across the country. I'll use the example that is closest to me in my backyard, which is the Nishnawbaski Police Service, NAPS. It's woefully underfunded. Just in terms of communications equipment, for example, infrastructure. There was an incident of a young officer in his 20s whose house was so moldy that his spleen exploded. Had to get out. Officers who spend routinely 1 or 2 weeks past their due date to come out for a break. There's no one to take their place. There are only a couple of communities, in fact, in the whole NAN region that have more than one police officer in the community. And so there's a real problem and a real concern. Also, not just that, I'll sort of double my question here, so I'll give you lots of time to answer, Mr. Taves. There's under an initiative that is coming to an end of hiring more police officers, and you'll remember that one, they managed to hire 11 officers. Now, of course, that funding is, they think, coming to an end or has not been talked about in terms of continuing so they can keep the numbers and their forces up. It's a real concern in NAPS, as you know, and a real concern right across the country. And so how do these supplementary estimates happen there, or is there a separate sort of way that First Nations policing is funded, and is there money for that? Are we going to see an increase in that?
Well, what I can say is that, first of all, we have to understand policing, even policing on First Nations community, is a provincial responsibility, entirely a provincial responsibility. What the Government of Canada, however, has done is entered into agreements with the provinces in order to fund First Nations policing. So we only are involved as a funding partner. We don't involve ourselves in First Nations policing other than through the agreement, because it's a constitutional responsibility of the province.
When you talk about contract policing then and estimates, that's not part of what we're talking about, the money that eventually gets to First Nations policing.
No, that's separate and apart, and that is being discussed right now. So as a funding partner, the federal government has said, all right, let's look at this particular program and see, in terms of renewing it, what the federal contribution should be to this provincial responsibility.
Now, and I know that you are aware of these issues, and I know that you're concerned about these issues. Do you see a way forward for policing organizations like NAPS and others across the country that are really struggling to fulfill their mandate and to do the best job they possibly can? You know, in light of particularly situations in the NAN communities where the estimates now are about 70% of the population is addicted to oxys. Lots of issues that require the resources in there. Do you see a way, as the Public Safety Minister, that you could possibly move forward on this and to help relieve the situation?
Very quickly, Mr. Rafferty, your time is just about up.
Well,
very quick. Your time is up.
My time is up, but I know that my officials can answer this. But in terms of the question, I think it's a good question. Do I see a way forward? I believe I do. And I believe that we have to sit down with the provinces and determine, is there a better way of delivering these services? Should it be done in different ways? Should we be giving the provinces more flexibility in terms of how they allot the money that we provide to them for this? I'm open to that. Obviously, we're all subject to particular financial constraints, both at the provincial and the federal level, and of course, the First Nations community themselves often face strains in budgets, and this is why we need to do things better with the resources that we have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, and thank you for sticking around a little longer than you had committed to. We appreciate it. We're just going to continue with the, we aren't going to suspend, we're going to continue. We'll move to Mr. Norlock, and all the officials are here for us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to the witnesses, thank you for being here today. My question will be for, I guess, my favorite Minister of Corrections, Mr. Head. Mr. Head, our government's agenda, tough on crime agenda, to put dangerous and repeat offenders behind bars, where they belong, I might add. Are you able to speak to the projections for growth of the inmate population up to this point, and how this figure compares with actual? Because I can recall some time ago you appearing before us, and of course, part of your mandate is to project to the future the needs that you're going to have, your prison population, and then of course we come at the end of that term to the actual. So I wonder if you can talk about those projections.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think the committee members will recall when we talked about the projections a few years ago, we were estimating at this time we would be close to about 18,000 offenders in the federal system incarcerated. As C-25, when C-25 was passed in March of 2010, we started from a base of 14,027 offenders, and we were basically monitoring our growth against that. Today, our count stands at 15,050, so significantly less from what those original projections were, which were developed in 2008 based on 2005 data, the only data that was available from the Canadian Centre for Justice Statistics. We have since then, for lack of a better word, re-scrubbed our data and have revised the projections. Our projections for this year are, for 2012, for us to be at 15,050, and for next year to be about 15,270, somewhere in that order of magnitude. So these numbers are much less than the projections that we talked about a couple of years ago. And for us, that has also meant some relief in terms of some of the pressures and concerns we were worried about in relation to construction and capacity within our existing institutions, and with the number of new units that were being built in existing institutions, which will actually give us by 2014 2,752 more cells. Which will definitely help us in terms of just managing the reduced population growth that we are now projecting.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for mentioning the second part, the investments in making our current fleet of institutions accommodating, because one of the assertions, I know, because I ran in the election where that we're going to build these mega prisons, and in actual fact, we haven't built any new prisons, nor do we intend to, and thank you for that. Part of the projections, of course, that you have, and the actuals, of course, would I be correct in saying they are part of the reason that you have not requested any additional funds? And I wonder if you can talk about how you, being a part of the federal government, were able to adjust your projections and adjust your budgets for the Deficit Reduction Action Plan, and where you were able to find efficiencies.
Thanks again for the question. In terms of the Deficit Reduction Action Plan, our reduction by 2014-15 will equate to 12.58% of our starting budget, which equates to $295 million. This fiscal year, we're reducing $85 million. Next fiscal year, $170 million, and by 2014-15, $295 million. So those were the plans without any adjustment to the accommodation plan. In addition to the deficit reduction action plan, when we went back and revised our accommodation figures, we projected a return back to the Treasury of $1.4 billion over 6 to 7 years of monies that are not required.
Thank you very much. And if I take part of what you said and we're able to expand on it a little bit, and we always talk about frontline services, so would you say the areas of reduction, and I'm looking at my own the institution within my riding, that were done sort of in the office, but not in the actual, not an actual correction officer area? Would that be commonplace throughout throughout Canada? Your reductions in personnel were actually at the administrative level rather than at the, for the sake of a better word, service delivery area.
Yes, the bulk of our reductions of the $295 million, $120 million are going to come as a result of closure of 3 institutions, which will be able to manage that population with the new capacities that are being built. But the other reductions are not specifically frontline service delivery positions. There are some reductions to some areas in relation to correctional officers and parole officers, but these are as a result of efficiencies in terms of how we do business. Some of our practices have been in place for 10, 15, 20 years. The overall transformation agenda that we've been implementing since 2008 has identified some areas for us to revitalize, re-engineer some of those practices without jeopardizing the safety or security of the staff, citizens, or the offenders themselves.
And when you talk about the institutions that will be decommissioned, I can recall visiting Kingston institution, and for the folks at home who need to know why we do some things, would you let us know how old that institution is and describe its somewhat archaic architecture?
The Kingston Penitentiary predates Canada. It was built in 1835 and has been in operation pretty well every year since then. I mean, there have been many reconstruction projects, but you can imagine a walled institution like a box, you can only readjust the pieces inside so many times before it's no longer viable or useful. It's traditionally that Charles Dickens-style prison with open-faced bars, great big gates, armed cages. If you saw Shawshank Redemption, you saw Kingston Penitentiary.
All right, thank you. Mr. Scarpellegia, please, for 7 minutes.
Thank you. If my colleague, Mr. Dion, were here, he would say it predates Confederation, not Canada. But I have some statistics in response to an order paper question on the number of staff, or on the level of staffing in different regions, and these cover the period 2006 to 2012. For example, the number of inmates in Atlantic prisons declined 5%, but the number of staff rose 16%. The number of inmates in Quebec prisons rose 5%, but the number of staff rose 15%. In Ontario, the inmate population rose 16%, staff rose 28%. In the Prairie provinces, inmates 15% and staff rose 27%, and so on. Could you, is this what we're cutting back on now? Did we overspend, or did we overhire, or were these, did we overhire? And if so, how did that happen? And if not, if we didn't overhire, if this personnel is required, what is the reason for the disproportionate increase or seemingly disproportionate increase?
No, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair, again for the question. A very good question, an opportunity for me to explain some of the numbers. During the last several years, there have been investments into corrections in some key areas. If I go back to to 2008 during the strategic review process, we actually received a $47 million reinvestment back into corrections, which allowed us to strengthen our capacity to deliver various programs to offenders. So there was increases in programs for offenders serving shorter sentences, 2 to 3 years, programs related to the community maintenance area, violence prevention programs. There was an $11 million investment in programs specifically for Aboriginal offenders. On top of that, we received investments in the area of mental health. In 2005 to the period 2005 to 2010, we received $29 million for our community mental health initiative, and then that was normalized in our budget with an ongoing $6.1 million increase.
But we're not going to roll back this increase in staffing, are we?
No, these are key investments in frontline program delivery to offenders.
Now, you're aware that Mr. Sapers wrote to you, I suppose, it says here to Commissioner Don Head, about double bunking and double bunking in segregation cells, and it sounds like a fairly serious situation. And in the response that Mr. Sapers received from an individual, Ann Kelly, who was CSC acting commissioner. I'm not sure what, did she precede you? Is this or no?
No, she was acting for a period of time while I was on leave.
Okay. She says pressures continue to arise at this site, and I guess we're talking about Stony Mountain, due to the presence of maximum security inmates awaiting transfer to other facilities and or court processes, as well as due to presence of the challenging dynamics of managing a complex security threat group situation. It doesn't, we can say that there are fewer inmates than we anticipated, and I suppose that's a good thing, but it doesn't sound like the pressures have been alleviated, and that there are still pressures in the system, and we've heard, for example, that the court system may slow, the court processes may slow down because of the elimination of the credit for time served and so on. I mean, how do we, how can you be so confident that everything is hunky-dory in the face of this double bunking situation where inmates are double bunked? I think I read somewhere for like 23 hours. And, it doesn't sound to me like the pressures are being alleviated, and it sounds to me that maybe the reason we required more staffing in some of these institutions is because we're dealing with more complex populations. We've got many different types of populations in the same institution. And as a matter of fact, that's what the head of the Corrections Officer Union came to tell us when we were studying the problem of drugs in prisons, and that's what they were protesting about on Parliament Hill, and that's what they were protesting about in front of the Prime Minister's office in Calgary. So I understand that we're going to have fewer inmates, but it seems to me that the pressures are still quite strong and maybe even growing, and that would lead me to believe that maybe there are problems with the predictive ability within the correctional service. I mean, if we predicted 18,000 and we only had 15,000, that's good news, but why are we off by 3,000?
So I'll deal with your last question first. The issue, as I reported to this committee before, in terms of the projections, was a problem in relation to data that was compiled in 2008, with the only available data in terms of remand growth in the provinces from 2005. And in 2005, at that time, all the projections from CCJS, Canadian Centre for Justice Statistics, were indicating that the remand population was going to continue to grow. So we factor that into the calculations. The next time the stats were available from CCGS, it was actually the numbers had turned around. In terms of your issue around double bunking, particularly at Stony Mountain Institution, Stony Mountain is unique in the fact that it's the only federal penitentiary in the province that, other than Rockwood, which is the minimum security next door, that houses medium security offenders. So in the odd time when there are problems within that institution and inmates have to be segregated because they've been involved in assaultive behavior or other activities that they should not be involved in, they've had to, on rare occasions, place them in segregation and two in segregation. The number of days that they've spent two to a cell in segregation has been very few. We have an exceptional warden there who works very hard at alleviating reducing those numbers in a safe manner as possible, but as quickly as possible as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just again remind each one on the supplementary estimates when we're considering them, we're looking at the supplementary estimates. Now, when we talk about prisons or Corrections Canada, there is in the supplementary estimates lined items of canteen and construction and those type of things, but double bunking, unless you word your question in a form that asks why there isn't more money for that type of thing, just encouraging you to help out a bit, Leary. Yeah, thanks. Mr. Garrison, please, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the officials for being here today. I want to start with a question to Mr. Guimont directly, and this related to the supplementary estimates, which provide $242 million for the federal government's share for the cost for contract policing. But the thing that's no longer there is funding for the police recruitment fund. And so I guess my question is, why is that absent from the supplemental estimates? Is it true that that fund has been completely expended at this point, and are there is there additional demand for that could have been funded in the supplemental estimates? Because I believe, from what we heard from municipalities, that there is unmet demand for this fund.
Merci pour la question. Thank you for
the question.
And I hope, as a newcomer to the department, I will have a long and productive relationship with the committee. So I'm happy to be here today. Maybe just 2 points, and I may ask my colleague, the Commissioner, to say a few words as well. The dollars with respect to contracting policing has been identified in Subs B as a result of the negotiations which have been completed. So I just want to be clear on that. So that's obviously an increment that was not there at the time of the mains, but it was indicated. With respect to the police officer recruitment fund, $400 million was set aside in 2008, and you're obviously familiar with this. And right now, that program will end March 31st, 2013. I would say simply, from my perspective, and I'm fairly fresh and new to this line of business, it is felt that the program, through the recruitment, has achieved its outcome. And that is why, at the end of the fiscal year, the program will simply sunset. So officers were hired, quite a number, 2,500, if I remember, across the country. And these people are now operational. And it is felt that this top-up meets the requirement that was felt as necessary in the context of the announcement made in 2008. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn to my colleague, Mr. Paulson, if he has anything to add.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know that I can add much to the fund and the sunsetting. Of course, I can speak to the contract policing supplementary estimate if you'd like some more information on that. But I share the Deputy Minister's understanding.
Well, let me turn then with the Deputy Minister to emergency preparedness. What we saw in the original budget was a cut to funding for the colleges offered courses and a cut to the programs which funded municipalities to send people for emergency training. And we heard a lot from municipalities after that time about how this was essential to their ability to build their emergency plans and carry out operations in emergencies. So again, in the supplemental estimates, I would hope we would have saw a restoration of that funding to municipalities and a restoration of funding to the emergency preparedness courses at the college here in Ottawa, since we had so many people saying that this was an important part of their emergency planning. And when we see the effects of climate change and the greater frequency and intensity of natural disasters that are taking place, it seems that there's a demand here that's not being met in the emergency training area that was previously met by the federal government.
Thank you for the question. I think, Mr. Chairman, I'll start with where the minister ended in some way on that very topic, which is the government has made an announcement on mitigation fund, 99 million, almost 100 million in 2012. And I guess, again, I say this, and I won't do this every time, but I'll do it a second time here. As a newcomer, you have either the choice of putting more resources to reacting and curing, which is quite all right. That's the actual DFAA payments that we carry out. And there's been a top-up, and this is right now in the estimates, as we all know. But there's probably a very good logic to make sure that you try to minimize and prevent disasters from occurring. So, and that is the whole thinking behind that 99 million that was put forward. And we're right now seeking approval in subs B for 50 million of that 100 million. That then leads me to the very specific question you asked. On the issue of the college, if I take that as a for instance, it is felt that the college has done what it needed to do. Said differently, this agreement we had essentially put in place through programming is now offered, if you wish, in the private sector, other level of people that can provide for the type of training that was provided. So that's one segment. The other segment is that as this decision was made, we are also developing, or in the process of developing with the Canada School of Management, some curriculum content to offset some of the program that might have been available through the college. So there's really two angles, therefore. Products are available fairly widely, and that's, I think, is understood and fair to say. And secondly, we're not totally ignoring the need for training. We're going to be working through the school on a curriculum that will hopefully offset some of those needs.
Thank you very much. Again, reminding we're on a 5-minute round, question and answer, so it's very compact. Mr. Leaf, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses. Good to see most of you back again, and Commissioner Paulson, we've let you remain rather quiet here today. I'll field my questions toward you. We were all obviously very happy to see the contract jurisdictions signing their policing contracts. Maybe I'll just get you to comment on how important contract policing is across Canada and what investments we've made in contract policing programs. And then on the heels of that, maybe just touch on which provinces and territories have renewed their contract policing agreement with the RCMP, and what are the main changes in these contract policing agreements?
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. I'll try and be brief, but essentially, contract policing exists in 8 out of the 10 provinces, so with the exception of Quebec and Ontario, we are the provincial police force in those provinces. We share that role with the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, of course, in Newfoundland. So we're it's the only province that has 2 provincial police forces. And we're also the contract police force in the territories, in all the territories. And that essentially means that we do frontline policing, municipal policing, response to call policing, and provincial police duties. So all policing activities. I think the feature of the new contract that is of interest, that might be of interest to the committee, is the new accountability measures that we're deploying to address concerns that were uncovered or, I guess, emphasized during the negotiation process. In other words, our contracting partners who are contributing an important amount of money towards this service are naturally interested in having some active say in the priority setting and the deployment of some of these resources. So there is a rather robust accountability scheme in the new contract to account for the expenditure of all of these funds. We've had a couple of meetings now with the Contract Advisory Management Committee comprising all of the officials from the territories and provinces, and we're beginning to lay that track of responsiveness to their interests, accountability, opening up the books, as it were, to demonstrate that, but also in not just money, but in service standards. So I think it harkens a new era of accountability for the provinces and territories, and an ability for the RCMP to continue to serve Canadians.
Thank you. I would assume that when provinces and territories are looking at re-entering the contract with the RCMP, some of them dabble a bit in looking at what it would take for them to engage in their own policing services. You did touch on it now that the accountability structure and the deployment of resources in partnership with those provinces obviously has become a significant benefit to each of those provinces and territories now in terms of looking toward the RCMP as their police force of choice. Can you touch on some of the variables that the RCMP engages in with the provinces, particularly the territories, that might be unique to jurisdictions that allow the RCMP to be not only the sort of the icon force of choice, but the economical force of choice and the service delivery force of choice for Canadian provinces and territories?
Well, I think that one of the features that we provide to our contracting partners is a consistent, sort of understandable level of service and professionalism, and an ability to understand just exactly what it is they're getting for their dollars. There's also a training standard. There is a service standard. There are performance standards that are shared with our contracting partners that we try to live up to. So. And I think there is, on the one side, we say that officers come into communities and then they leave communities. But there is a benefit to be had by the transfer of officers across the country to strengthen that sort of consistency of policing service across the territories and across jurisdictions, which provides for that consistency. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leaf. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Now we'll go to Madame Doré-Lefebvre. Vous avez 5 minutes.
Excellent. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today. It's really quite interesting, and there are many questions that I have, but I'll try to be brief. My questions are mainly for Commissioner Head. But to get back to what Mr. Guimond was saying, you referred to the $400 million fund. You discussed that with Mr. Garrison earlier on, and you confirmed that the fund was no longer needed according to the data that you have, and that it would not be renewed as of March 2013. According to the information that I have received, for my part, further to consultations with a number of police forces, especially in Quebec, I would say, but throughout Canada, this fund is really quite needed and quite relevant. I know that in Quebec, when you look at the amount, that $400 million over 5 years, it's a bit over $92 million that Quebec would be getting, and they're currently using that for mixed squads or joint squads. How do I put it? To fight street gangs. And since the implementation in the first year of this program, cities have been working together, and it's been able to, it's led to a reduction in street crime, murders related to gangs, etc., gang violence, etc. Are you absolutely sure? Has there been consultation with police forces, actually, to know that that $400 million was no longer needed? That'd be my first question. And are you sure that that fund will not be renewed and that is really no longer necessary? Thank you for the question. First off, it's not that the fund is not needed, it's that it did what it needed to do. In other words, officers were recruited. And second point, once the investments had been made, the officers recruited, I think there are certainly needs for the various police forces to work together to the best of their abilities to improve efficiencies among those people that are there now. and to ensure cooperation between police forces. That's what I would say. Now, as to your question as to whether there was consultation with police forces, I would have to defer to my people. If you don't mind, I'll turn around and see my colleague, Graham Flack, Associate Deputy Minister, cannot sit next to me, but he says, confirming that there were discussions.
We can just have another chair brought in for...
Maybe you can...
There have been continued discussions with il y avait des discussions continuelles avec des provinces.
There have been continued discussions with the provinces on that point, and you're right. The other jurisdictions have always expressed an interest in having a standing fund. But when the fund was announced 5 years ago, the government pointed out that this fund would be a one-time fund, an injection of $400 million. It would sunset as of the end of this fiscal year. So it was as planned. But you are right. The provinces would have preferred to have had this money to be ongoing. Thank you very much. Thank you for confirming that. It's much appreciated. Now, I'd like to turn to Commissioner Head. I appreciated the conversation you had with Mr. Norlock. Mr. Scarpaleggi also raised some very interesting points, I think, as to double bunking, for one. We were also talking about the number of inmates. You came up with the calculations as to the potential increase in number of inmates over the next year. And you also referred to new cells that would be built. Long story short, in my riding, one of the three facilities will be closed. Établissement Leclerc is the facility in my riding. And I visited Kingston Penitentiary. These are two completely different types of institutions, but I wanted to just point this out. As to the new cells that are going to be built as compared to the older ones, are we going to have more cells as a total number, or will we have fewer at the end of the day?
At the end of the day, I thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question, and I'd also like to thank the member for her interest in Leclerc. I know the staff have very much appreciated the visit and the engagement, so merci beaucoup. At the end of the day, we will have more cells even with the closure. So when we net out approximately the 1,000 cells from the three institutions that we're closing, with the 2,752 that we're building, we're net about 1,700 more.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both. We'll move to Mr. Hahn, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. And I just want to, one more time, for Mr. Flack or Mr. Guimont, the hiring program that we promised in election, I think it was 2006, was very specific for 2,500 members. That was done. Program's finished. Time to move on. It was never intended to be a permanent program, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
In the budget announcement, the finance minister indicated it would be a one-time injection.
Yeah. And Commissioner Head, I guess I want to thank you and commend you for not asking for anything more this year. I think that's, you know, a good example to set for folks. Mr. Fadden, I'd like to ask you a question about, you know, there's been some concerns expressed in some areas about oversight and accountability in CSIS because we are merging the responsibilities of the Office of the Inspector General and SERC, the Security Intelligence Review Committee. Can you just explain how SERC will continue to provide you know, vigorous independent oversight over CSIS, and is that merging of any particular concern to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't think so. To begin with, the specific responsibilities of the Inspector General that are enumerated in the statute, that is to say, certifying my annual report, have been transferred to the SERC, and a small number of FTEs have been transferred as well. I think the other thing to remember is at the time the service was created some 30 years ago, the environment was quite a bit different. Today, the federal court is far more active in monitoring what we do and how we do it. They have amicus, they have special advocates, you know, there are all sorts of things of that nature. As well, 27 years ago, the public service and the service did not have an independent internal audit system certified and controlled by the Treasury Board. So if you put all this in the pot, if I can put it that way, I think we're still monitored quite effectively. one of the things that I advocated at the time the government was considering this change was something called unity of monitoring or unity of oversight. There was, when there was an Inspector General, occasionally overlaps in what they were doing. In the end, the government agreed that this wasn't an effective use of the taxpayers' money, and they moved in this direction. And in the final analysis, we're saving about $1 million a year.
Very good, thank you. For Commissioner Paulson, you know, the contract policing is in place. We've talked about that a little bit. I don't know about other provinces, but in Alberta, as I'm sure you're aware, they've initiated a sheriff's department. Do you see that as a positive thing? I'm sure you probably would, but how does that impact the duties of the RCMP in, for example, Alberta, in terms of them assuming some of the responsibilities, e.g. traffic?
Yeah, traffic, and thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think you know, what we want to do, and what I'm on my focus on all the time, is trying to innovate our delivery of policing services, both in the contracts and in our federal, you know, primary mandate. You know, the RCMP has started a long time ago, and we've done a lot of things in law enforcement, including, you know, transporting prisoners from court to the correctional facility. We do traffic, and so we're always looking for opportunities to save money. In fact, we have a couple of programs within the RCMP that are looking at different ways of delivering services that don't attract the sort of you know, as we're talking about transfers before, the Aboriginal Community Constable Program, for example, is a new way, a new kind of an officer that we're looking into Aboriginal communities and communities to bring those officers forward and then send them back to their community to stay there. So no, I think that's a very positive development where we can look for efficiencies and continue to partner with any number of agencies to help us do our job.
And Claire, I would assume it obviously provides some financial relief for money that you would otherwise have to ask and expend on contract policing.
No, that's right. That's exactly right.
And a question for Mr. Seneko, because we haven't picked on you at all. There have been some changes in regard to criminal record checks with respect to pardons, or the new terminology, I forget what we call pardons now. But could you just outline some of those?
The changes in the legislation now are called record suspensions versus pardons. So there were basically two areas that the process on June the 29th, 2010 was when the major legislation changed. So new decision processes came into place for record suspensions, and it really talks about two concepts. The first is whether the record suspension would provide a measurable benefit for the applicant, and the second involves a series of factors that board members have to determine to ensure that the granting of a record suspension would not bring the administration of justice into disrepute.
Thank you very much for the question and for the answer. We'll go back to the official opposition, Madame Doré-Lefebvre. You have
Je vais passer la parole à Monsieur Rafferty.
I'd like to turn over the floor to Mr. Rafferty.
5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guimond and Mr. Flack. My first question is to you. You heard my questions to the Minister regarding First Nations policing, and I wonder if you could give us some idea of the amount of money that is being spent this year, and I gather it's all being transferred to the province for First Nations policing. At least that's my understanding from the Minister. You did subsequently answer one of my questions, which was the police recruitment fund, which is now gone. And that, I just want to say that creates a further hardship on First Nations policing, particularly those who have hired officers and are underfunded already. So how much money is being transferred this year for First Nations policing across Canada?
Thank you for the question, and I'll look at my colleague, Mr. Flack, to top up my answer as required. The first point I would make, Mr. Chairman, is that this is a cost-shared agreement or approach. So 52% is paid by the federal government, and the difference 48% by the provinces. So that's an important first point to make. Second point to make is that in budget 2011, and that's a direct answer to your question, 30 million was provided for 2 years to augment the program. So essentially for 2012-13, the program is 120 million. And you made, if I may say, you were asking the minister, is there anything in subs B with respect to this program? And the answer is yes. That 120 that I just mentioned, there is a segment of $1.75 million which is on the table to be approved, and that money, which is part of the 120, but it's part of subs B before you, would be given to the RCMP to purchase the services through that program.
Yeah, so in a province like Ontario that does not have the RCMP in a direct role in provincial policing, how does that work in Quebec and Ontario, for example?
Now I am outside of my depth, and I will turn to my colleague, Mr. Flack.
As I think, Mr. Chairman, the committee members may be aware, it's a tripartite program, so it's negotiated with the First Nations as well, and the delivery vehicle varies by First Nation. In some cases, it's a First Nations police force, a local police force that provides the services. In some cases, those services may be provided by RCMP members or with the support of the RCMP. So it will depend on the community. It could involve provincial police as well, depending on the community. So we leave that up to the community to determine the best way to deliver it. Ultimately, those arrangements vary, regardless of whether it's a contract jurisdiction or not.
Yeah, I can certainly make a comment on that. What we're talking about, if I use the same example of NAPS, the Anishinaabe Police Service, they police 47 communities. So it's not just one community that we're talking about, and increasingly so because policing right across the country is getting crunched. All budgets are getting crunched, whether it's federally funded or provincially funded, municipally funded, and increasingly so when a few years ago NAPS, for example, could depend on the OPP to help out in certain instances, they're no longer able to help out, and so it becomes even more critical in a policing situation like NAPS in Northern Ontario, where the demands increase considerably. But the funding does not increase considerably, and so and we're talking about basic things. We're not talking about operational money here. We're talking about money for infrastructure, money for communications, money, that sort of thing that's been neglected at the expense of, understanding that you've got that many communities. You need to hire a certain number of officers to police those communities, and it becomes increasingly more difficult. So. And I don't know, you are new, Mr. Guimond, but I'm sure you have probably seen some correspondence from First Nations police forces across Canada, or maybe you haven't, about the dire straits that they are in. And so...
just your time is right on the 5 if you're going to give them an opportunity.
I wonder if you could just comment quickly on whether you're aware of these issues that exist in First Nations policing communities.
Well, I will only say, Mr. Chairman, that
very quickly.
I had some briefings on this by my colleague, Mr. Flack, number one. Number two, there was a top-up, so obviously there's an acknowledgement that there was a gap between the requirements and what should be done. That's the famous $30 million. And no, I have not seen at this point correspondence on that, but, it's obviously a topic that is of interest to the committee. So,
thank you very much. We'll move back to the government side. And to Mr. Payne, please, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for coming. And I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to, through you, Chair, to Commissioner
Payne for your question. As we can see here, the bells have just started to ring, and I'm held to the orders that when the bells start and the vote is called, that basically concludes our meeting. So we will wait.
Thank you, Chair, for that wonderful opportunity.
You've tweaked our interest in your question there, Mr. Payne. We'll have to wait for another time. I want to thank our guests for coming today and for answering the questions in regards to the supplementary estimates. To our minister who left earlier, and then to each of the head of the departments, thank you so much. We are adjourned.